You need to notify the unions by Monday, Trevor repeated, like he was asking me to pick up dry cleaning. The paper he slid across his desk was still warm from the printer, like the decision had been made 30 seconds before I walked in. I stared at the letter just long enough to read the words effective immediately. My name wasn't even spelled right. 9 years, 14,000 paychecks, 4 state systems built from scratch, and the goodbye was a misspelled termination notice written in Calibri. His niece, according to him, had streamlined everything with some Excel templates she whipped up after a single HR training video. She's a natural, he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Fresh ideas, fast thinker, MBA from somewhere good. I didn't ask where. I didn't say a word. I just folded the letter slowly, like it was origami, and tucked it into my bag. No tears, no theatrics, just silence. Hey, before we keep going, if you're the kind of person who values stories that don't flinch from the truth, hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of you watch these stories without subscribing, and trust me, it means a lot to the team that works behind the scenes to bring them to life. All right, back to the mess. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out. That's the thing about a quiet exit. People don't notice it until the systems they took for granted don't hum the way they used to. I didn't go home. I went back to my office. Well, what used to be mine, until Trevor decided that the niece with pivot table potential could handle multi-union payroll infrastructure like she was flipping pancakes. I took down the picture of my boys from the bulletin board, the faded note from my dad that read, "Structure wins always," and a dog-eared copy of the original tri-state union agreement I'd helped negotiate 7 years ago, back when the company was still begging for labor peace and the boardroom smelled like drywall and burnt coffee. I didn't touch the files. I didn't erase a thing. The real structure wasn't in the folders anyway. It was in the systems, the pipes, the conditional logic embedded into payroll protocols, vendor release cycles, and the not-so-small matter of union dues compliance. Trevor didn't know that in 3 out of the 4 state chapters, any change to payment disbursement, especially those affecting retirement withholdings, had to be cleared by the named payroll director of record. That name was still mine. No override without written notice. No notice had been filed. And those union heads? They didn't just trust me. They knew me. I'd been to their barbecues, sat through grievance panels, brought coffee during contract marathons that stretched 26 hours without sleep. Trevor's niece? She thought the phrase prevailing wage had something to do with inflation. I left at 6:02 p.m., shutting the office door behind me. I didn't slam it, but I heard the hum of the HVSE falter as I walked away. That system always acted up when someone disconnected from the central terminal too fast. I smiled. Let them figure it out. At home, I poured a glass of iced tea and pulled out the file box I kept in my hall closet. 3 faxes, already pre-addressed. 1 to the Pension Oversight Bureau, 1 to the Eastern Labor Coalition, 1 to the Tri-State Labor Alliance, each with a simple attachment, the Transition Declaration Form, a neat, precise document noting that no authorized clearance had been given by the standing payroll director regarding changes to dues deduction. It wasn't a threat. It was just protocol. And Trevor? By Monday morning, he was going to learn something the hard way. You don't fire the woman who knows where all the ledgers are buried and expect the machine to keep running. When I first joined Mid-State Infrastructure, Friday mornings looked like a scene from a Depression-era soup line. Men in boots and neon vests standing outside the site trailers, arms folded, waiting on paper checks that got miscounted or misdelivered half the time. I was hired to clean it up. What they really meant was make it look like someone gave a damn. I didn't roll in with slogans or slide decks. I rolled up my sleeves and started at the root. Standardized time reporting across all districts. Synced up the pay cycles between our field teams and the back office. Built digital bridges between our state compliance systems and the payroll engine so nobody had to beg for retro pay or overtime corrections. Then came the hard part. Unions. 4 states, 3 major alliances, 14 locals. They didn't trust corporate, and frankly, they had every reason not to. Before me, someone forgot to report dues for 3 pay cycles. Another time, the wrong insurance code got submitted, and 30 men lost their health coverage for a month. After that, the unions didn't want smoother. They wanted accountable, so I met with them. one by one. I didn't show up with HR. I brought donuts, payroll printouts, and a notepad. I asked what they needed, where the gaps were, and how to keep their guys protected without tying up the whole system in red tape. Over months, we hammered out MOUs, memorandums of understanding, that weren't flashy but made things work. They were simple, tight, and binding. And inside those MOUs, buried between clauses on apprenticeship wage brackets and rain delay credits, was a single paragraph. A safeguard. It said, "No change to disbursement models involving union-related withholdings or dues shall be enacted without written authorization from the acting payroll director on file with the Regional Compliance Board." That was me. Has been since year 2. Now, maybe Trevor saw payroll director and figured it meant the person who hits send on Fridays. But what I built wasn't just a system. It was a living contractual ecosystem, one that hummed because it was deeply rooted in trust, paperwork, and regulatory timing. And you don't unplug the heart without checking what arteries it's attached to. His niece? I'm sure her Excel model looked good on her MacBook. Probably even had drop-downs and color-coded tabs. But did it account for certified apprenticeship wages in West Virginia? Or the quarterly audit formatting required by Kentucky's Union Local 18? Did it automatically split disbursements across multi-site workers with split jurisdictional pay codes? She didn't even know what multi-site meant. Meanwhile, I'd built a pipeline where a foreman could clock in 6 crews with a barcode scanner and see deductions synced before lunch. Pensions, health funds, dues, rainy day credits, all mapped, pre-coded, clean. It took me 5 years to get it there. You don't just patch over that with Excel. But the beauty of the thing wasn't just in the design, it was in the memory. The system remembered who had paid what, when they were owed it, and what would happen if anyone tried to fudge the rules. Because I'd built that logic in. And Trevor? He was walking right into the teeth of it, with a niece who thought conditional formatting was a compliance plan. That clause in the MOU wasn't flashy. It wasn't bolded, but it was there. And when the union saw that a payroll shift had occurred without that signature, without mine, it was enough to pause the whole machine. It wasn't sabotage. It was structure. Structure they agreed to. Structure I built. Structure Trevor never even noticed, until it stopped everything cold. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't throw a scene. When I handed in my badge and signed that final HR form, I did it with the same calm I used to balance 6 overlapping payroll cycles across 3 fiscal quarters. The girl in HR looked confused, like she expected me to cry or ask for a meeting with the board. But this wasn't emotional for me. This was procedural. And when you build a system right, really right, it doesn't need your outrage to defend itself. It just needs a nudge to activate. So I went home. Made a pot of black coffee I didn't need, opened the file drawer in my kitchen, and pulled out a yellow folder labeled MOU Triggers and Escalations. I had drafted the transition declaration form 2 years ago during a systems audit, not because I thought I'd ever need it, but because I knew someday someone would think they could cut corners. It was only 1 page, no legalese, just a clean formal statement that a change in disbursement process had occurred without written authorization from the acting payroll officer. At the bottom, 3 signature lines. Mine, the employer's, and the regional auditor's. Trevor never even saw it. That alone told me everything I needed to know. I rolled out my fax machine, the same clunky brother model I'd used since 2015, still faster than corporate email chains, still harder to ignore. First fax went to the Eastern State Union President's direct line, second to Central Labor Leadership in Louisville, third to the pension oversight officer I'd worked with for years, who once told me, "I don't trust systems, I trust names I remember." Each fax had the same subject line typed in bold: unauthorized transition, verification required. No threats, no red ink, just documentation. A flag quietly placed on the field. I didn't sleep that night because I didn't need to. The paperwork would do what it was designed to do, like a circuit breaker tripping when overloaded, like a fail-safe catching a missed decimal before someone's check bounced. At 6:42 a.m., I got a confirmation ping from the East Union's office. Received. Reviewing. At 7:13, a brief reply from the auditor. No declaration on file from authorized payroll officer. Logged for escalation. That was the rhythm of it. Quiet compliance, no yelling, no calls, no mass email hysteria. And Trevor? He had no idea any of this was moving beneath him. The thing about paper trails is, when built right, they don't need you to push. They just need a reason to activate. And once they do, they're impossible to untangle without going back through every clause, every timestamp, every form with your signature missing from the bottom line. His niece may have cleaned up the spreadsheets, but she didn't know what came before them, or what held them together. She hadn't sent a transition declaration because she didn't know it existed, because she never asked me, because she thought I was just another legacy holdover with a good memory and bad boundaries. Turns out, the only thing I was holding was the lever, and I had just pulled it. Monday morning didn't start with sirens or shouting. It started with silence, the kind that fills a room right before a storm rips the roof off. The Eastern Union chapter was the first to act. At 7:11 a.m., they issued a formal hold across all active infrastructure sites until payroll compliance could be verified against the standing MOUs. 2 minutes later, Central State followed. Suspended cooperation, pending legal clarification. The language was calm. The impact wasn't. By 8:03, the Tri-State chapter, the most temperamental of the three, took it further. A full-scale work freeze on 11 high-volume sites. No crew movement, no deliveries, just engines shut down and equipment powered off. It wasn't a protest. It was procedural, just like the paper I'd sent them. The unions didn't need to raise their voices. They had something better, leverage, backed by binding language activated by a breach. All it took was one missing name on one required form. And Trevor? Trevor walked into his first operations sync of the week thinking it was business as usual. His niece was seated beside him with her laptop open and her spreadsheet ready. Tabs color-coded like that was going to earn her credibility in a room where most men didn't check email but could tell you exactly what time the concrete truck had rolled up last Friday. What they saw instead? 12 foremen sitting stiff in their chairs, work boots still muddy, hands calloused from weekend shifts. Not a word. No small talk. Just a single sheet of paper in each of their hands, folded lengthwise like a prayer bulletin. The facts. Same one I'd sent Friday night. Same one they'd received again Monday at 6:05 a.m. Retransmitted from the Central Labor Command. It read, "Notice. No certified payroll transition approval on file. All remittance and dues changes must pause pending verified clearance by the standing payroll officer of record." That name was mine. Trevor tried to speak. He made it halfway through the phrase, "Let's circle back," before one of the foremen held up the paper, slowly, like he was in church about to testify. Then another, until all 12 of them were holding the same message in the same silent posture. He didn't get angry. He got quiet, which for Trevor meant he realized too late that something had slipped far beyond the reach of an Excel macro. He tried calling down to materials. No answer. Tried pulling up the site dispatch dashboard. Offline. Flagged for compliance lock. Subcontractors started texting in, pausing shipment, pulling back gear. Legal said to wait. One crane operator flat out refused to unload a steel shipment without confirmation from the union accountant. No one was yelling. No one was storming out. Because real systems don't explode. They just stop. They freeze. They grind down to stillness. And that's when you feel the weight of every cog you didn't realize was turning for you until it didn't. Trevor looked at his niece like she was going to offer him a fix. She just stared down at her laptop, clicking between tabs. Maybe trying to find the one where 14,000 paychecks sorted themselves, cross-referenced against 4 sets of dues schedules, and then politely sent themselves off without legal clearance. But that tab didn't exist. Because I had never built it. Because no one could. The system ran because people trusted it. Because I spent 9 years embedding that trust into every part of it, from the auditors to the union clerks to the subcontractor check release logs. You can't spreadsheet your way into institutional memory. And now that memory was holding its breath. The call came in just after noon. Unknown number, but I knew the area code by heart. Tri-State headquarters, same one printed on every dues reconciliation form I'd signed for the last 6 years. I let it ring once more, then picked up. "Still got the same number, huh?" the voice said. Rough, deep, a little amused. It was Mason Roy, president of the Tri-State Labor Alliance, the kind of man who could end a concrete pour mid-slab with a single word. I'd only heard him raise his voice once, during a flood shutdown that stranded 2 crews on a floating scaffold. The man didn't waste breath. "We got your heads up," he said. "Facts came in, and the pension auditor flagged it to us too. I assume you're not doing this out of spite." I let the silence hold a second longer than necessary before answering. "Just protocol." He gave a low chuckle. "That's what I figured." What I didn't say was that I'd anticipated this exact scenario 4 years ago, when a regional VP tried to sneak in a temporary payroll contractor during my vacation week. That incident led to a revision in the MOUs, tightening definitions, adding signatures, and formally registering my name as the compliance trigger for any model transition. That revision had Mason's initials on it too, so he wasn't calling to question what I'd done. He was calling to confirm I still meant it. "You know what kind of chaos this is causing, right?" he asked. I did. 11 sites on freeze, deliveries rerouted, over 6,000 workers in limbo. "I know," I said, "and I also know the clause." "Damn right you do." He paused for a moment, then continued, voice more serious now. "You got someone on the inside who's going to try to fix this?" "No. They replaced me with someone who thinks VBA is a governance strategy." He exhaled through his nose like he was shaking his head. "Well," he said, "we're holding off until this is handled properly. You keep your line open." That was all. No demands, no threats, just a declaration backed by the quiet power of someone who didn't need to shout to stop an entire region in its tracks. That's the thing about systems built on trust. Once you earn it, it works for you, even after you're gone. Mason knew I didn't send that fax to cause trouble. He knew I wasn't trying to burn the place down. I wasn't out for drama, headlines, or some kind of public spectacle. What I'd done was simple. I'd followed the process. The same process I'd written, tested, and signed with him, line by line, to protect both sides. The company broke it. The unions enforced it. And me? I was just the line that connected those two realities. When the system halted, it wasn't an accident. It was memory acting like muscle, an instinct kicking in when something smelled off. By the time we hung up, 2 more calls had come in, one from a regional foreman, the other from a subcontractor liaison wanting to know when things would go back to normal. I told them the truth. I didn't know. Not anymore. Not since Trevor handed me that paper and assumed a signature could erase a structure. But what I did know was this. Until someone with authority followed the process, nothing would move. And behind every still crane, every quiet job site, every driver waiting in a truck cab with his clipboard untouched, was a single, unanswered question. Where's the signature? And that name, printed at the bottom of every copy, still mine. They called it an emergency oversight review, but by the time everyone filed into the 6th floor conference room, it felt more like a quiet funeral for common sense. The CFO was there, legal, 2 compliance officers, 3 directors from field ops, and Trevor, still trying to look confident in a room full of people who had stopped respecting him 2 days ago. His niece sat beside him, practically glowing with the kind of nervous energy only an MBA intern can radiate when they're absolutely sure they've built a transformational model. She opened her laptop like she was unveiling a Tesla prototype. "This is the new disbursement flow," she began, clicking into her Excel workbook. "It's color-coded by labor tier and automatically syncs to QuickBooks using this—" She paused to squint at the tab. "This macro." First sheet. 3 errors popped up before she even touched the keyboard. One was a basic formula reference pointing to a cell that didn't exist. The other 2 were calculation mismatches in the pension line items, red flags to anyone who's ever had to reconcile a labor contract against a multi-state payroll schedule. She kept clicking, eyes darting. Then someone from legal leaned forward. "Where are the withholdings for multi-jurisdiction union dues?" She blinked. We haven't implemented that part yet. Have you worked with any of the compliance layers for union remittances before?" the compliance officer asked. Her voice dropped. "No, but I watched a few walkthroughs online, and my professor at school said most systems are overcomplicated." "Overcomplicated," echoed someone from field ops, almost under their breath. Trevor sat stiff beside her, arms crossed like if he just held his posture long enough. It would stop the meeting from bleeding out in front of him. That's when the compliance officer turned, slow and deliberate, and asked the question, "Did you consult your outgoing payroll director on any of this?" The air thinned. Trevor didn't answer. He didn't shake his head or nod or offer some fumbled excuse about transition timelines or onboarding gaps. He just sat there, lips pressed into a line, eyes fixed on the back wall. Like if he avoided eye contact long enough, the floor might open up and swallow him. The room stayed silent for a full 10 seconds. No one moved. No one tapped a pen or cleared a throat. Because that silence said everything. It said the foundation was cracked. It said no one had checked. It said the one person who could have prevented all this had been walked out with a folded letter and a polite nod. Trevor's niece tried to scroll through more tabs, but the confidence was gone now. Her voice wavered as she explained a conditional format meant to auto-highlight errors. But the spreadsheet had already done that for her, just not the way she wanted. The CFO pushed his chair back. "This isn't a fix," he said flatly. "It's a liability." Another exec scribbled something on a legal pad and underlined it twice, probably prepping for a call with the board. Someone from legal murmured, "Contractual violation, depending on how far the remittance errors go." And still, no one looked at Trevor, because now he wasn't the problem. They were already moving past him, sorting through the fallout. I wasn't in the room, but I didn't need to be. The system I built was there, humming in the background. Every missed reference, every broken formula, every absent signature. It all pointed back to one thing. Structure doesn't care if you're enthusiastic. It cares if you know what you're doing. And in that moment, with everyone staring at a spreadsheet that couldn't carry the weight of real infrastructure, the entire oversight panel finally understood. Trevor hadn't just fired the payroll director. He'd removed the system's spine, and now the body was folding. The board met behind closed doors on Wednesday morning. No calendar invite, no agenda. Just a quiet reshuffling of schedules, a few high-priority calls canceled, and a sudden uptick in executive assistants whispering in hallways. They didn't even ask Trevor to join at first. Word around the office was that he stood outside the glass wall with a mug of coffee that had gone cold in his hand, watching the silhouettes through the frosted glass, watching the people who, just days ago, had cheered his modernization initiative, now sitting together without him. That night, the internal memo went out. Effective immediately, Trevor R. is being placed on administrative leave pending further review of payroll compliance breakdowns and systemic governance failure. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. Just clean and surgical, the way real decisions get made when reputations are at risk and someone needs to be removed without shaking investor confidence. The next day, her badge stopped working. No goodbye, no cake, no LinkedIn post about learning so much on this journey, just a deactivated credential and a scrub directory listing. Her contract was voided under Clause 11B, failure to meet regulatory expectations of fiduciary handling. It had been buried in the vendor onboarding agreement. I helped write that clause 3 years ago. By Friday morning, the chairman of the board called me directly. His voice was steady, professional, maybe a little humbled. "We need to restore trust with the unions," he said. "The auditors, the pension committees, we need this fixed, quickly and quietly." "I'm not coming back," I said. He paused, maybe waiting for a counteroffer or some offer to renegotiate. I gave him neither. "But," I added, "I trained someone. Her name's Jocelyn. She's quiet, sharp, worked under me the last 5 years. She's already union vetted and knows the remittance layers cold." "Would she take it?" he asked. "If she trusts that the structure won't be torn down again, she will." He exhaled slowly, like that answer both comforted and unsettled him. "Thank you," he said, "for not making this harder than it needs to be." But I wasn't making it easier either. I didn't want a headline or a reinstatement or some half-hearted apology dressed up as a promotion. What I wanted was for the system to survive, and for the people who depended on it to trust it again. Not because I was back at the helm, but because someone solid was. By sunset, I got a call from Jocelyn. Her voice was shaking. "They offered it," she said. "I didn't even apply." "You don't need to," I said. "You already passed the only test that mattered. The unions know your name. The pension boards use your files. They trust you. Just do what we built, and don't let anyone touch the automation layer." She laughed, nerves unraveling. "I won't." And just like that, the system had a new steward. I didn't need the chair to be warm when I left it. I just needed to know it would be respected. Legacy doesn't always mean standing in front of a crowd or having your name etched into a plaque. Sometimes it's just a clean handoff, and the quiet confidence that what you built will outlive the people who tried to replace it with a spreadsheet and a smile. It was nearly 3 weeks later when I pulled into the gravel lot at Site 14, one of our oldest active zones and the first to shut down during the freeze. The trucks were moving again, and the distant thump of rebar being dropped into staging bins echoed over the lot like a heartbeat finally returned to rhythm. I wasn't there on business. I didn't need a clipboard, didn't carry a radio, just wore jeans, a flannel, and my old mid-state fleece with the faded patch on the elbow. Some part of me just wanted to see if the work had truly resumed, if the bones I helped pour were still holding weight after the collapse. Frank, the foreman, saw me before I made it 10 steps. He walked out from under the scaffold with his hard hat tipped back, and that familiar crooked grin that always made him look like he knew something nobody else did. "Well, well," he said, gripping my hand like I hadn't nearly dismantled his entire payroll structure a month ago. "Heard a rumor the queen of the spreadsheets was back." I shook my head. "Just visiting." He jerked his chin toward the portable trailer near the edge of the lot. "Come on, let me show you something that'll make you sleep at night." We walked slowly across the gravel. No rush, just the hum of machines, the sound of work happening. Frank nodded toward a freshly delivered load of steel. "Arrived on time. Can you believe it?" "I can," I said. Inside the trailer, the dry erase board was full. Shift schedules, delivery logs, union check-in reports, all handwritten again. Jocelyn's name was on the compliance update line. Her notes were tight, the kind that only came from someone who'd learned not to guess. "No more Excel experiments," Frank muttered, pulling out 2 chairs. "Jocelyn's got it running smoother than I've seen in years. Says she's not changing a damn thing until at least 3 audits go by without a single red flag." Smart woman. I sank into the chair, watching 2 workers adjust a lift strap through the narrow trailer window. "You came to check her work?" he asked. "No," I said. "I came to make sure it didn't fall apart without me." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded like he understood more than I said. "Well, it didn't." There was no ceremony, no thank you speech, just the rustle of wind against plastic tarps and the distant beep of a loader reversing toward the materials rack. I stood after a while, brushing sawdust from the back of my pants. Frank didn't stop me. "You're welcome back any time," he said, "but you know that already." I looked out across the site, men moving with quiet certainty. No confusion, no frozen processes. Everyone knew what to do, and more importantly, they knew the system would back them when payday came. "It runs fine without me," I said, more to myself than him. But Frank heard it. He nodded once. "Only because you built it too." I left without needing to walk the site again. No need to check. The real walkthrough had happened the moment the crew picked up their tools again, without hesitation, without fear of another freeze, without wondering if the person behind the system actually knew their names. And that's when I knew the job was truly finished. Not because I'd fixed anything, but because I didn't have to anymore. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the email popped up in my inbox. No subject line, just a link. I almost deleted it, assuming it was junk, until I saw who sent it. Dennis from Compliance. Always dry, rarely personal, never dramatic. If Dennis sent something, it mattered. The link opened to a networking site I hadn't bothered with in months. Trevor's profile. Trevor R. Operational strategist. High-scale transitional leadership. Infrastructure modernization expert. I read it twice. Let the absurdity settle in like dust on old forms. There he was, all cleaned up and repackaged. No mention of the recall. No hint of the union freeze. Just a tidy little narrative about implementing scalable systems in multi-state environments and driving technological advancement through adaptive personnel shifts. I almost laughed. Scroll a little further and I saw the comment. Anonymous. No photo, just the default gray silhouette and 6 simple words. Pro tip, never skip the master ledger. No one had replied. No one needed to. It was the kind of comment that cuts once, deep, and stays. I didn't react, didn't forward it, didn't save it. Just closed the tab and stared out the kitchen window for a while, watching wind push across the neighbor's plastic patio chairs. All that noise Trevor had made. And now, just a ghost with a new headline. He'd tell himself he led a transformation, that he helped the company evolve, that the freeze was an unfortunate hiccup in a complex transition. He'd never say he triggered a multi-state shutdown because he ignored a one-page form. He'd never mention how his niece walked out of a meeting humiliated because her formula didn't account for even the simplest of pension withholdings. He'd definitely never talk about the systems he didn't understand, but dismantled anyway. And he'd never admit that what broke wasn't technology. It was trust, institutional memory, embedded logic, the invisible scaffolding that keeps large things upright when people stop paying attention. But I didn't need him to admit it, because the system already had. It spoke through halted cranes, through faxes stacked on foremen's desks, through quiet site trailers where even the coffee machine went untouched until someone signed the right line. Jocelyn ran the show now. The union audits came back clean. Backlog was caught up within 3 weeks. And not once had she needed to reimagine the structure, because she respected it. And that's the lesson Trevor never learned. You don't have to fear the person who built the system. You just have to remember to consult them before you try to overwrite them. I wasn't a threat. I was a page in the manual he didn't bother to read. He thought I was just the lady who hit send on paychecks. He forgot who built the system that made sending them possible.